You could, that red light goes on here, see.
Okay, Elisa, do you want to...
Please start to introduce Russel. What I'll do is the normal pattern, I'll talk for a while and then go over to questions, discussion. I often feel that the best parts of these times are the actual discussions and questions we get into. The talk is setting a context in which we can begin to explore other things. So, Earth Day. It's interesting it's Earth Day, not because I'm interested in environmental issues, and it's nice to pick the anniversary of Earth Day. It's also, I was going to say by coincidence, it's not by coincidence, the new edition of the book, The Global Brain, is published today on Earth Day. So it's a publication of the new edition, The Global Brain Awakens. And actually, a copy here, it's actually published. It's interesting, this Earth Day, here we are, 25th Earth Day, and a lot has happened. I'm old enough to remember the first Earth Day, and just how different things were then, 25 years ago. The environmental movement was virtually non-existent. It was just seen by most people as a few sort of hippies wandering around concerned about DDT and things like that in our food. It was nothing compared to what it is now. In some ways, I think the environmental movement problem really started in the late 80s, probably 1987. I think we look back in the future, when did the environmental age begin? I think the year 87 will stand out as a landmark. Because up until 87, the environmental issue was something that always stayed on the back pages, never a front page issue. It just seen as something quirky that a few people were concerned about. And 87 was significant because just a whole chain of events happened there. There was a big drought here in North America, dolphins started being washed up dead on the shores, the ozone hole was being really discovered about then. People started talking about the greenhouse effect. Everything came together and people suddenly realised it really was an issue that had an impact on their lives. In fact, at the end of that year, Time magazine took the step and instead of having person of the year, at the end of the year, had planet of the year. And since then, environmental issues have been, quote, respectable in beyond front pages. And now, just a couple of years ago, we had the Rio summit. Everybody's aware of environmental issues. It's interesting how much press coverage the 25th anniversary of Earth Day got compared to virtually zero coverage the first Earth Day had. And a lot's happened in the environmental movement. We can see a lot in our own lives, just things like recycling. And you couldn't recycle 25 years ago. There was no way you could recycle. There was nothing to do to recycle. Nobody would take paper or cans or things like that. Today, I'm sure most of us recycle in some way or another. We're much more aware of our consumption. We've got pollution controls in effect, a lot more environmental protection. And there's a lot more happening on the global level, beginning to think seriously about how we curb greenhouse emissions, these sorts of things. The CFC protocol is sort of in effect. How it's going to operate in China and things is a bit unclear, but things are changing. But there's, I think, lots more that's got to be done, lots more on the individual level, and certainly lots more on a global level. And what I want to do today is consider not what needs to be done out there in terms of how we stop deforestation, how we stop pollution or control population. All these issues are being looked at. They need to be looked at a lot more, need a lot more attention, but they are getting some attention. there's another issue which I want to focus on tonight, which hardly gets any attention at all. And that's the question of why do we do all this damage in the first place? And why are we so slow to actually change and clean up the mess? Because we like to call ourselves an intelligent species. We like to call ourselves the most intelligent species on this planet. But if you consider the way we actually relate to the environment is insane. It's the most insane species. I mean, just to take the example of CFCs. 25 years ago, they were only just being developed. And when they were developed, they were actually designed because people were looking for a substance that was inert, safe to human beings, non-flammable, that could be put under pressure, various things that had criteria. They found the CFCs, the chlorofluorocarbons, were just the thing to do it. Then we realised, pretty soon after we put them into production, that they might damage the ozone layer.
Sorry, we're late.
That's okay, we only just started, we were late too. The companies didn't immediately take them off the market because they might damage the ozone layer. They kept it quiet 10, 15 years until there was various movements people talked about. It was only when the actual hole in the ozone layer was discovered that people really started taking it seriously. And even now, I mean, as soon as we discovered the hole in the ozone layer, we should have just stopped CFC production immediately. But no, we wanted years to slow down, change production, this sort of thing. I mean, if we destroy the ozone layer, this is something that newspapers don't usually tell you, although anybody knows anything about the ozone layer knows it. The only reason life on land exists is because the ozone layer is there protecting the land from ultraviolet light. Each year when the Antarctic or the Arctic ozone hole expands, newspapers report that the ozone hole has grown by 3% or whatever, and this means that over the next 20 years the number of skin cancers will double or something, the number of eye cataracts will similarly double or something like that. So the average person in the street thinks that the effect of losing the ozone layer is skin cancer and eye cataracts. It may be that to us initially, but human beings, we put on sunglasses and wear big hats and things to protect our skin. What are bees going to do? Nobody thinks about bees. Blind bees aren't very good at pollination because bees use sight to find flowers. If you've got blind bees, you lose the whole pollination cycle. Or take plants. The tip of a plant, the growing tip, is very, very sensitive to ultraviolet light. You destroy the ozone layer, you destroy plant growth. In fact, if you destroy the ozone layer, we wipe out life on land, basically. The only life that will survive is life below the surface of the sea. And who knows what the chances are that we'll destroy the ozone layer. I think a conservative guess might be 10%, 1 in 10 chance that we're going to destroy the ozone layer the way we're going. Might be higher, it might be lower, but it's certainly a reasonable, significant chance. And what do? We sort of argue about how slowly we can reduce CFC so as not to put too many people out of work. And that's insane, absolutely insane. And I think if you got on a plane one day, imagine you got on a plane and the captain says, just taken off, the captain says, well, thanks for, flying with us, wherever it is, and we've got great movies, great food, and free drinks, and make your life really comfortable. And the technicians have been tinkering with the plane in order to improve the air conditioning and the audio system. And to do that, they had to borrow a few parts from the navigation, the bit for the engine, but, it looks okay. The engineers say we still fly. The plane's designers say we've only got a 50% chance of making it to our destination, but management tells us there's no evidence yet we're going to crash, so we keep on flying until we find any evidence. And you'd be landing the first parachute on that plane. If you were told that before something was off, you'd never get anywhere near it. But here we are in a similar situation on the planet. And all we can do is just, what most people just deny it. We don't even want to talk about it. Newspapers dare to tell people how dangerous the situation really is. And this is the question, that fascinates me is why. There's something in our consciousness that's holding us back, in our attitudes, in our values. And I think it's important not only to deal with everything we're doing out there to stop pollution, to reduce consumption, to change habits, to change corporations, to get stricter government controls, all that stuff has to be done. But at the same time, we need to ask the question, why are we doing all this in the first place? And why can't we change? Why are we so insane? Because unless we also deal with that, we're not dealing with the core issue, the root issue. No other species causes the ecological damage that we cause. What is it about human beings, let's say the so-called intelligent species, that does this? Because at the moment, we're just treating the symptoms, I think, of a much deeper problem. It's a bit like if you went on to your doctor who said, I've got a headache and a fever. And if all the doctor did was say, here's some pills to lower your temperature, and here's some pain suppressants, if you don't feel any pain anymore, you're cured, go away. We don't think that's a very good doctor. A good doctor is going to say, well, maybe here's something to take the pain away, but let's look, what's the cause? Maybe it's dietary, maybe it's stress, maybe it's something, some virus, who knows, but let's find out the cause. You don't just treat the symptoms, you've got to treat the cause as well. And that's what I think we need to do with the environmental crisis, as well as dealing with the symptoms, we've got to look at the root cause. And this is what's really fascinated me, not just for the last nearly 25 years, is understanding that root cause and what we can do about it. I started off, as Todd said, doing physics. I was doing mathematics and physics at Cambridge, I loved it was fascinating. In fact, I was studying with Stephen Hawking at the time. He was my tutor, my personal tutor. He could still speak and walk then in those days. He just finished his PhD and was just doing his work on black holes. And I was loving it. But suddenly realised that physics was never going to answer the questions I was really interested in. The questions I was really interested in were questions about the human mind, human consciousness, how we thought, all these sorts of things. And that's why I took a shift and changed to psychology, making a strange degrees in physics and psychology. It's like I've gone as far as I wanted to in the search for physical truth, but I'm now much more interested in truths about the human mind. And that search took me out to India when I finished my degrees. I went out to India and lived in India for a while studying Eastern philosophy. And that was, I think, a real turning point in my life, because what I saw there, I was doing a lot of deep meditation as well as studying theology. What became absolutely clear was that behind just about every problem that humanity was facing on a social level, global level, or even on a personal level, were these psychological issues. Greed, wanting to be in control of things, love of money, these sorts of things. Human self-centeredness, selfishness, seem to underlie so many of the problems. And what I realised there in India was that this wasn't a hardware problem, like some people suggested. Some people suggest there's something intrinsically wrong with human beings. Somewhere in our evolution, something got miswired in the brain, and that we become this aggressive, self-centered, egocentric species. And the English writer Arthur Koestler, he believed that, and he actually suggested the only cure for humanity was either brain surgery, and how you do brain surgery on 5.3 billion people, I don't know, or else some drug wouldn't have the effect, but you haven't got the drug either yet. I don't think it's a hardware problem at all. I think it's actually a software problem. It's a problem in the programs that drive us, the belief systems that are fed into us by our society. And that's the root cause. That's what we need to look to. I also became interested at that time in the whole analogy between cancer and human society. I got quite interested in Jim Lovelock's idea, you probably know the Gaia hypothesis. The Gaia hypothesis suggests that the whole planet, not the whole physical planet, but the whole biosystem of the atmosphere, the soil, the oceans, and all the creatures that live in that thin web of life around the planet, function as one single integrated system. It's like a single organism. And if you take that view, you can see how the rainforests are a bit like the livers in function, the oceans are a bit like circulatory systems. You can draw parallels between the way things happen on the planet and what we know about how organisms function. And it fits in with general systems theory. You find these levels of systems operating throughout. And the question I was playing with was, okay, well, what's humanity doing here? Because the fact that planets existed for 99.99% of its life without humanity, we are just, as Indian teachers put it, a blink in the eye of God. And we are literally that. In fact, if you take the age of the universe to be your own lifetime, then the time it takes you to blink is about the time humanity's been around. So for all the rest of the time, all your life, apart from one thing, is to be without humanity. But the planet's got on quite well without us. What are we doing here? Do we have a function on the planet? One of the ideas I was playing with still am in the global brain is the idea that because we are the information conveyors, we share ideas through language. What we have is a very sophisticated language system which allows us to exchange our learnings, our experiences, which no other creature seems to have. We're almost like the information net around the brain, around the planet, and particularly now with computers, telecommunications, internet, it's going much like the brain is formed. But it was also clear that we are very much like cancer as well. In fact, I was always struck by a photograph I saw many years ago of a cancerous growth in the human body, and comparing that with an aerial photograph of a city. And you see exactly the same sort of systemic way that they grow out, the way the cancer grows out in the body, the way the city grows out in the environment. They're very similar. But I was also interested how the similarities at a much deeper level. And the cancer in its behaviour, first of all, it tends to be a malignant growth, tends to grow very fast. Humanity's growing very fast. Secondly, a cancer, you could say, is a very self-centered system. It's not growing in harmony with the rest of the body, it's just fulfilling its own needs. And it's also, on top of that, very stupid. Because if a cancer is successful, it destroys its host. It's not like parasites, which have evolved over millions of years to live with their host in a way that's mutually supportive. Where they don't kill the host, most parasites, some do. But the cancer, if successful, kills its host. And humanity seems to be just like that. We're growing very fast. We are very self-centered. And all we should be concerned about is human welfare, primarily our own welfare. And we're stupid. Because if we keep on like this, we're not going to be here much longer. I don't think we're going to destroy the planet. A lot of people talk about, oh, we must save the planet. I think the planet is quite okay. I think the living systems are quite robust. But even if we destroy the ozone layer and push life back into the sea, billion years' time, I'm sure the ozone layer will have formed again and life will have crept onto the land and there will be another species facing the same sort of crisis. I don't think, but if we don't destroy the ozone layer, we've probably already destroyed humanity. I'm sure there'll be indigenous pockets of people left to, over time, create new civilizations, hopefully reflecting this one. But I think the way we're going, we're certainly going to destroy our own civilization if we don't wake up and change pretty quickly. Now, if you look at cancer, where I became more interested was what is it underlying cancer? Basically, cancer you consider as an error in programming. that for one reason or another, the DNA programs in the center of the cell get disturbed. Could be by a virus, could be by radiation, could be by toxic things you consumed in the air or in your food. In one way or another, the DNA gets disturbed, and programs which should be switched on get switched off, or vice versa. Programs which should be switched off, which are good in early development, get switched on again. And so cells start growing, reproducing, when they're not meant to be doing that. And it strikes me that again there's a very close parallel with humanity. That we've got programs switched on, belief systems, if you like, switched on, software in our minds switched on, which shouldn't be operating, which is a leftover from the past. And it's this that's behind a lot of our malignant behavior. And the program which I'm most interested in, I think, is a basic survival program that's there in us and probably in every single creature on this planet. It's a program basically is there to ensure that you survive as a physical organism. If you're hungry, you go and find food. If you're cold, you look for water. If you're thirsty, you find water. It's there to ensure that we survive. And when we're surviving, when things are going well, we feel good. We feel in balance, but we feel good inside. When things aren't going well, we begin to suffer. If you're hungry, you don't feel good. Hunger is an unpleasant experience, and it's designed to be that way. We don't like unpleasant experiences, almost by definition. And so we go and eat some food because we feel better. We eat food. And so this is the underlying drive, the underlying monitor, if you like, of our behavior, is, are we feeling good inside? Are we feeling happy? Are we feeling at peace? If so, we're probably doing okay. If we're not feeling good, if we're suffering, if there's pain, it's a call to attention to something out of balance. Which means that our basic, like our bottom line motivation, is actually to maintain a certain state of consciousness. We're trying to maintain a state of consciousness which is one of feeling in an okay state. And if you go back 200 years or so, before the Industrial Revolution, then whether or not you're in an okay state is probably almost certainly to do with how your physical environment was. And before the Industrial Revolution, most of us, 97% of us, would have been working on the land, whatever the season, weather. Winters were very hard then. That's where a lot of people died. They were cold. We didn't have central heating. Food is what food you gathered in the summer, probably a few potatoes and salted meat. There wasn't much of a diet in the winter. A lot more disease. Life was very hard then. And if you were suffering, it was probably because you were hungry, diseased, freezing cold, something like that. And in that situation, you obviously need to do something physical to remedy the situation. And that's, in a way, what brought the Industrial Revolution about. The people who really pioneered it, they began to see what their technology could do. People like James Watt, who was playing the steam engine, Wedgwood, the potter, we now think of Wedgwood as nice blue china teapots and dinner plates and things. He wasn't making nice blue china teapots there. He was playing with clay and realizing he could make pipes, put them underneath the streets, and drain the sewage away so it didn't flow down the gutter. He put it underground, and so improve health. These people actually had a society going then in 1775, or through the late 1770s. It was called the Lunar Society, because they met on the full moon of every month. And they met in a house in England, south of Birmingham. In fact, Ben Franklin was part of this group. He was a sort of visiting member. He was one of the early commuters. Whenever he was in Europe, he took about 6 months into it. Whenever he was in Europe, he attended their meetings, and the rest of the time he was in contact by letter. And they actually seen the Industrial Revolution. They saw what could be done to improve the quality of human life and reduce the suffering. And they did it. It's a miracle. I mean, here we are just a mere 200 years later, and none of us are going without food in the winter. None of us are freezing cold in really cold summer. We have basic heating, we have water, we have shelter, different qualities of different people, but we all here, I'm sure, have decent shelter, not living on the streets. We have drinking water, taps we can just turn on and make it taste perfect. It's there. They did it. We actually transformed society, not the whole world yet, but the countries where it started, Europe, North America. We're living in a totally different world. The problem is, we don't know when to stop. The average Westerner now consumes something like 350 times the resources of a person 200 years ago. And that's the energy we consume in our transport, the energy we consume in our food production, in our houses, and what it takes to produce our clothes. You add all that together, we each on average consume 350 times the resources of a person 200 years ago. On top of that, there's 10 times as many of us doing that as there were 200 years ago. You multiply those two together, it amounts to a 3,500-fold increase in consumption. And with a 3,500-fold increase in pollution. That's why we've got an environmental crisis. I mean, a 35-fold increase in consumption, a more dramatic way of putting it, is to say that we now, in 1 year, consume more, in fact several times more, what previously the whole of our civilization consumed from the beginning of Greek culture up to the Industrial Revolution. If you take the whole consumption of that 2,500 year period, we now consume more than that each year. And it's growing. And this, why don't we stop? And this is the question, why do we keep on? And I think one of the reasons is that this program, this survival program, which was absolutely right 200 years ago, when our main issues were food, shelter, warmth, drink, water, those sorts of things. The basic program is still operating, though we don't need it. Our physical needs are being met. I think we all have, all of us in this room, and the majority of people in the West, not everybody, we have our physical needs met. If we're unhappy, it's not because we're freezing cold or starving, it's because we feel insecure, or we worry what other people think about us, or jealous, or we're bored, whatever. They're inner psychological things. That is our psychological needs, which are driving us crazy, which are not being fulfilled. But what happens is, in our society, if you're feeling down, low, you're suffering in some way, if you're not happy, if you're not in this good feeling okay, our society says, go and do something. Go and take yourself to the movies, or go out for a good meal, or go buy yourself a new pair of jeans, or whatever. Telling us to change the world around us, and we'll feel better. And that's the old program. But it doesn't work anymore. When you go out to a movie, you feel great when you see the movie, the next day you wake up and you're still feeling shitty. And you have a wonderful meal, You then spend the rest of your time wondering when you're going to have as good a meal again. Or we go and buy a new pair of jeans, it's wonderful that first week or two, we say, oh, I really like the jeans, it's great, and then the effect wears off and we end up with closets full of clothes we don't actually need, because their psychological effect is worn off long before their physical use is worn out. And it's because we're looking outside in the physical world to try and satisfy an inner hunger. And that's the basic mismatch. There's a wonderful Sufi story about that, some of you may know. It comes from the Tales of Nasruddin. Nasruddin in Sufi tales is the wise fool. He appears foolish, but there's a lot of wisdom in his teaching of what he's actually doing. It's a way of teaching in Sufi, a bit like parables in Christianity, these foolish tales in Sufism. And this particular story tells you how one day Nasruddin is found on his hands and knees in the street outside his house at night, underneath the street lamp, looking for something on the ground. And his neighbour comes along and says, "Oh, what have you lost?" And Nasruddin says, "Well, I've lost the key to my house." And the neighbour says, "Well, that's very important. Let me help you find it." So the neighbour gets down on his hands and knees too, and they're scrabbling around with dirt. And after a few minutes, the neighbour says, "Well, exactly where did you drop it?" And Nasruddin says, "Oh, I dropped it in my house somewhere." And the neighbour says, "Well, excuse me, what on earth are you looking for out here?" And he says, "Well, it's more like out here." Now, we laugh, it sounds absolutely stupid, but what are we doing in life? And we're looking, the key we're looking for is the key to basically how do we feel okay? How do we get rid of our suffering? How do we get ourselves in an okay state of consciousness? Today, the key we've lost is somewhere inside ourselves, but we look out there in the external world, because in a sense there is more life. This is the world we know how to handle. Today we can create almost anything we want in the physical world. If you want more efficient cars, yes, we can do that. If you want a drug, we can do this, yes, we'll do that. If you want clothes of this sort of material, we can do that. Anything we want, we can do in the external world. The world inside us at the moment is still very dimly known, very dark. We don't know much about our feelings, where they come from. We have, but that's about it, most of it. We don't know much about our thoughts, where they come from, how they operate, how our perception is governed by our attitude, these sorts of things. Psychology is just beginning to feel its way into that. The whole area of the mind is still hardly understood. So when there's something going on there that makes us feel uncomfortable, we usually look out there for something to satisfy that. And it doesn't work. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why we consume so much in our society. Most of what we consume, we don't need physically. Probably 90% of what we consume, we don't need physically. And we all eat far more than we need physically. Food, most of it. We consume things, clothes, commodities, whatever it is, because this belief almost hypnotized into us from birth onwards that if only we consumed enough of the right things, we feel happy. This is what drives us, this feeling. If only we got this elusive thing, we'd be okay with it. Whether it's the latest model of car or whatever, or VCR player, a bit of software, something's going to make us feel great. That's also, I think, what drives our greed. I think that's why human beings appear greedy. We have this belief there's not enough things out there, money, objects, people, whatever it is, to go round. The more I have, we think, the greater my chance of actually feeling okay, feeling happy inside. That's why I think we love money. And people often criticize our economy. Some people say we actually get rid of money. I don't think money itself is the fault. If you go back to the actual line from the New Testament, it says love of money, not money. Love of money is the root of all evil. I think the reason we love money is in our society, money gives us the ability to buy the things or the experiences or even the relationships we think are going to make us happy. It's not money itself, it's what it symbolizes, what we think it can buy us. And on one level we know it doesn't work. We all know in many cases people, and I know myself, there's all the money we could possibly desire, yet is he happy? Far from it. I think it's also, though, this same belief system that responsible for a lot of corruption, but also it stops us actually doing what we need to do in the environment. If you take the case of CFCs, chlorocarbons, why didn't we stop producing when we knew what the dangers were? Because it would have been disruptive for the companies concerned, they'd have had to, some people might have lost their jobs. But ultimately, because the companies are run by, not so much by the directors of the company, but companies in the end answer to the shareholders, the people who invested their money in the company. And the shareholders are sometimes other companies, but also there's ordinary people out there on the street who want their bit of extra money. They're investing their money hoping they can get a return. So, what I said, I don't think we can blame any single or any group of organizations or people. I think it's the whole system that is crazy, the whole system of Western culture, which we're now beginning to export, making it a global culture. The whole system is fundamentally flawed. It operates on this fundamental belief that basically like, whether or not you're happy, whether or not you're at peace, depends upon what you have or do in the world. And that's something that's probably hypnotized into us from our birth onwards. I know, I mean, for me, I look at myself. I was born into a family where that was, just assumed that was the case, and all through my growing up and through college, through education, that was the basic belief system behind everything, that the better you are at doing things, the more you can gather, the richer you are, the happier you'll be. And I always remember it was probably about 20 years ago, yes, a few more. I'd just come back from India, and I was having a conversation with my mother, and she was saying, well, you've been to college, and you've stayed on, you've done all these degrees, and you've traveled around the world, and you've been to India, and you've done this, and I also set up a whole food restaurant by this stage as well, a whole food restaurant in Cambridge. So you've done all these things, don't you think it's about time you got a job? I was still in my reactionary phase and said, why? She said, well, so that you can start building yourself a career and things like that. And I said, well, why? And she said, well, you might want to buy a house, put a deposit down, furnish it, and so you can take nice vacations and get married, and all this sort of stuff. She had all these reasons, and I kept asking why. Until finally, out of complete frustration, she said, well, so that you can be happy, of course. And I said, well, aren't I happy? And interesting, she would stop and looked at me, paused, and sort of struck her. She said, well, yes, I suppose you are. And that was the end of it. That was the end of that sort of cultural conditioning. And then every time I saw my mother in the next few years, it was basically, as long as you're happy, that's the main thing. She let go of this idea, I have to have a job to be happy. And I've never had a job so far. So there's hope for you. Don't try to get a job. The media is probably it's such a part of this hypnosis, particularly advertisements. I mean, just about every advertisement you see, whether it's in the newspaper, on a billboard, television, if you analyse it, the message, the underlying message is, buy this product, this service, this vacation, whatever it is, spend your money with us, and you will be happier, or you will suffer less. That's the underlying message. Your life will be easier. I don't think anybody has ever sold or even attempted to sell a product saying, buy this and you will suffer. Buy this and we will make your life miserable. I mean, they know. In fact, when I saw an advertisement the other day in London, I was just going back to this boat in London, and was driving in the city, and there was this car hire firm, and I forget the name of the company, it wasn't one of the major ones, it was a small car hire firm, and it said, rent with us and be assured of peace of mind. If that's simple, all these gurus have been wasting their time. But that's the basic message all advertising tries to convey. I sometimes think every single advert should be like a cigarette advert, which has a little banner across the bottom, sort of warning by the US government. This product may make you happier, but it will only last a short time.
It will increase your zest for the next It will increase your zest for the next round.
Right. Well, I think actually, if I was dictator of the world, I'd ban advertising altogether. So basically, what I say is the crisis we're up against is a crisis of consciousness at its root. And in short, it is an external crisis the way it's manifested, but its root is it's a crisis in our thinking, in our attitudes, in our belief system. And a crisis comes about, whether it's a personal crisis or a crisis in a relationship or a national crisis. The crisis is always a reflection of the fact that a way that did work in the past is no longer working today. And that's what I think is happening with our global crisis. That way of thinking, which was valid 200 years ago, is no longer valid today, it's simply out of date. And what we have to do is to wake ourselves up from this cultural hypnosis. But unlike ordinary hypnosis, where the hypnotist just goes to, well, hypnotist just dehypnotise you by saying, count backwards from 5 to 1, and when I snap my fingers, you will wake up. It doesn't quite happen like that, because this state of trance has been sort of inculcated into us all our life. We have to work our way out of it. There's an interesting thing about hypnosis, that in a sense it's almost only skin deep. They found that you can hypnotise a person, I'm talking now about ordinary clinical hypnosis, you can hypnotise a person and they will behave exactly as you want them to behave, but something underneath it isn't effective. The classic experiment on this was done over in Stanford about 20 years ago. They hypnotised the subject, and when the subject seemed to be in deep hypnosis, they brought in a bucket of ice-cold water and told the person that this was ordinary water, room temperature water, and to stick their hand in this bucket of actually freezing water. Now, if you ever put your arm in freezing water for any reason, I'm not sure why you would. So if you've ever been in freezing water, it's not just cold. Freezing cold water is painful. It really is painful. After a minute or so, it really hurts. So here's this person under hypnosis sitting there with his arm in ice cold water, looking quite relaxed. No problem. They ask the subject how it feels. It feels fine. It feels hurt. No. It feels cold. No. Any discomfort. No. He looked quite happy. They said, okay, over here, don't look, there's a pencil and paper. Just pick up the pencil and let your hand do some automatic writing. So then scribble whatever it wants to scribble, but don't look. This hand started scribbling, ouch, it hurts, it's cold, stop the experiment. There was a part that knew exactly what was going on. And he was sort of sitting there looking quite happy and saying, no, it's fine, his hand was writing, no, it isn't. And I think it's the same with this cultural trance that we have. And we all know that money doesn't buy you happiness. But in you, riches don't, material things don't make you happy. Yet we somehow fall into the trance and think, well, if only I had that, I'd feel okay, whatever it is. So we get locked into this thing almost automatically, although this deeper part of ourselves, in hypnosis they call it the hidden observer, the part that always knows the truth. There's a part inside us which I think always knows the truth. And I would say the real challenge we're facing today is how do we reconnect with that part of ourselves that knows the truth, that knows that the stuff you read in the paper is absolutely correct, knows the whole way of living our life as humans. How do we begin to let that out and allow it into our lives more, so we can actually begin to change the way we live, the way we relate to each other. And this, in a way, I think, is what all the great spiritual traditions are on about. If you look at them, they all say, richness thus a picture of the kingdom of heaven. That's the Christian interpretation. Having all these material things won't get you there. I mean, Greek philosophy. There's Epictetus, who was a late Greek philosopher. One of my favourite quotes. He said, people are disturbed not by things, but by the view they take of them. And this is really essentially, it's not the things you have or don't have that disturb you, it's how you think about them that actually determines whether or not you're happy or not. An example I often use when I'm working in corporations that really seems to get the point through to busy business people. I ask how many of them get stressed or upset by traffic jams, by being in a traffic jam. And usually reckon probably 90% stick up their hands. And I usually know 10% will just shy. I then point out that's absolutely rubbish. No traffic jam actually has the power to make anybody upset. All a traffic jam can do is stop your car. That's the limit of its power, is to stop your car moving. It doesn't inject adrenaline into your bloodstream. If you're feeling angry in a traffic jam, it's because of the voice in your head that's ticking away saying, either telling you how stupid you were to go that way when you knew it. Or else it's saying, you know, I'm going to be late. If I'm late for work or college or home, whatever, it starts telling you all the bad things that are going to happen to you if you're late. That's why you start getting upset, angry, because of what the voice in your head is telling you. Somebody else could be sitting in exactly the same traffic jam and be saying, hey, this is wonderful, I've got no meetings to sit through, no problems to solve, I've got piles of paper, you know, I can sit back, I can relax, I can put on music of my choice. This is heaven for 5 minutes. That person's going to have a completely different reaction to exactly the same situation. But again, what we tend to do in our society, we make ourselves victims of the external world. We give up our own power on ourselves to actually determine how we feel. We make ourselves a victim of circumstances and then blame the circumstances. It's all part of this state of trance. And I think that's what the Buddha was also trying to say. And I think in some ways what the story of the Buddha is very parallel to what is happening in Western society today. And I expect most of you know the Buddha was born as a prince, rich prince, in a family in India, where he had, as a prince, all the luxuries I could ever think of, and not only luxuries, but servants and dancing girls. Anything he wanted was his. And the same probably for his family in the palace. But what he saw was that didn't end suffering. Having everything he would possibly wish for on the material level didn't end suffering. And so he set out to try and find how to end suffering. And he went through his search. The story goes how he spent 6 years travelling in the forest, visiting various teachers, etc. Until one day he woke up from the hypnosis, if you like. He woke up. And in fact, the word Buddha just means that, it means the awakened one. He woke up, and his first teaching to his first disciples was just about this, was about how we create suffering for ourselves through the way we see things, through the fact that we desire external things. Most of our suffering is self-created, and the teaching of Buddhism is how to let go of those desires through meditation, right action, right speaking, etc. It strikes me we're in a very similar position in our society. In some ways we are richer than any prince or king and queen ever was in the past. I mean, the conveniences, the commodities that we have available in our own lives probably make us richer than kings and queens in Europe 200 or 300 years ago. They didn't have air conditioning like we do, or heating, or the variety of foods that we do, those sorts of things. We are richer than them, the comforts we have. And I think we are like the Buddha, waking up to the fact it doesn't work. It certainly works to have good food, etc., but go on and on doesn't work. And it doesn't work on an individual level. There was a very interesting study done, well, it was done in, the first half of the study was done in 1957, and then it was repeated again in 1991. In 1957, they did a poll in the US asking how many people were satisfied with what they had in life, how many people felt satisfied with their life. And in 1957, 30% of the US population felt happy with their lot. In 1991, when they repeated the study, standard of living had probably more than tripled, the number of square foot each person had in their house had more than doubled, the number of automobiles had more than tripled, the number of television stations put up by a factor of 50. Everything had increased that you would think would increase the quality of life. And yet, the number of people who felt happy with what they had was exactly the same. It was still exactly 30%. Nothing had changed. So with all this material development, the real bottom line, which is how we feel, and that's our real bottom line, the real bottom line hadn't increased at all. It was exactly the same. So we're beginning to see that. We're beginning to see it doesn't work, this materialistic consciousness doesn't work on an individual level. And what the environmental movement is showing, it clearly does not work on a planetary level. And it certainly isn't going to work in the future. And I think the real crisis is about how can we wake up from this state? How can we actually change our consciousness from this hypnotized state to actually coming up with the truth that we all know inside us? I think we need to do that alongside everything else we're doing, because it's going to ease the transition. Because we need to let go of our attachments to things. I mean, gas is one example. And for everybody in this room, probably just about everybody in the United States now knows that, they don't know the figures, but something like 30% of greenhouse emissions, CO2 emissions, come from oil, burning oil. A lot of which goes to gas in our cars. So clearly we've got to reduce our consumption of gas. Ideally eliminate it. We know that. What happened when, remember Ross Perot? When Ross Perot was his campaign a couple of years ago, he suggested a 50-cent tax on gasoline, spread over 5 years, 10 cents a gallon per year increase. I mean, you already have the cheapest gas in the West. We in Europe pay 3 to 4 times what you pay per gallon. We already have the cheapest gas. And he's suggesting a 10 cents tax per gallon per year. And his ratings dropped 50%. And this is amongst the population who knows they've got to reduce gas consumption. Again, we have this conflict all the time between what we know needs to be done and our own individual self-centeredness. So if we can begin to shift that, get rid of our self-centeredness, then I think that's going to ease the whole process of the change. Yeah?
How can we help other people accept that? Assuming most of us are here, maybe half of us are already. Do you have any suggestions?
Yes, I mean, I think, and I just like to back up for a second. I think the question you ask is one I hear a lot, is how can we help them change? What we have to remember is, yes, I am one of them. I have to always remember that. With other people say, how can I change? How can they help me change? Because I look at my own life, I am not perfect by any means. And I still have areas in my life where I get concerned about money, and I can see areas in my life where I get greedy, those sorts of things. I see those things in myself. And I think that I really believe that the primary thing we can do is tend to ourselves first. First remove the motion in our own life. Because I am the one person I have responsibility for. But also, the more I can change, I think there's nothing like an example to change other people. If we can start becoming less self-centered in our own life, I think that can set an example for other people to change. I don't think you can force anybody to do anything. You can help them. I think part of my example by giving them suggestions as to what we're not. But also, you have to look at where is your own sphere of influence. I mean, you don't interact with the whole world. So another part of that question is, who are the people who you personally interact with? Who are the people you influence? I have quite a broad sphere because I write books, so I know I touch people in my writing. That may be a lot broader than you. The people you can influence are people in your own community, whatever that community is, family, street, college, when you have a community. So I think you also have to bring that question down to how can I help those people who I actually have interaction with. Yep.
There's a full-scale war going on in Western and really the world today in terms of, I've thought a lot about what you said, and it's in terms of advertising, in terms of marketing, in terms of there's a machine really, there's a vast conspiracy that started, people get all nutty when you bring up conspiracy, but Benjamin Franklin, the entire Industrial Revolution really was another thought about how to make more money. Money is the key factor in this. It's how to milk the consumer and the person for as much money as they can get.
But why do we want money? I mean, that's the deeper question.
I agree with you, but I'm saying that it's almost like this machine is set up, but it's also set up psychologically to say, well, you may know that you may be acting in one way and thinking this is wrong, but we're still always going to be bigger than you. We're still always going to be able to reach more people than you are, So I think in a lot of ways, people just start to develop apathy towards the whole situation, and not really be able to think that they can do anything outside of themselves to change the situation.
I think there's a certain truth to that. I think a lot of people, feel very powerless. They just see the situation running away with itself. And what can I as an individual do to actually stop that? In some senses, I don't think we're going to stop the crash. I think, to put it less politely, the ship is hitting the fan. We are living through that moment in history where the wrong thinking of hundreds of years is coming to a head. It can't go on. I think, unfortunately, one human trait is we don't change until things get comfortable. All the time things are comfortable, we'll carry on, even though we know we should be doing something different. And I see this with individuals who carry on leading a life that's clearly not good for them until they get ill or whatever, or their relationship, their marriage breaks down, then they start changing. And at the moment, the disasters we've had, Chernobyl, the Exxon Valdez, holes in the ozone layer, they're all conceptual. They don't actually affect us. We see pictures of oil spills, but they're not actually affecting anybody in their home yet, here in the USA. And so our comfort is threatened. It's only when we start feeling the pinch, I think unfortunately, people will start changing. is why I was saying to Todd earlier, I sometimes suggest, but only facetiously, that we should all drive as big and thirsty a car as we can, so as to bring the crisis on as quickly as possible, but then maybe we'll have a better chance of dealing with it. But on the other hand, I think we can prepare for it. The preparation is in our own lives, and encouraging as many others as we can to shift our perceptions, begin to see that we aren't dependent on things. To a certain level, yes, but once we've got our basic necessities covered, it's the inner world we should be attending to, not the external world. And I think the more we can do that now, the better the chance we have of surviving whatever the crises are may really be. But I don't think there's any way we can avoid stuff now. We are powerless, I think, to really stop things being very bad. All we can do is keep the situation under control as much as possible and try and prepare ourselves inwardly for whatever's going to come. Yep.
You talked a lot about, I agree with thoughts on why we consume in the first place. Well, okay, why we consume and why we feel the need to consume. I believe that the way we think about the world is a result of our experience and is fed into us by the structure of society. I'd like to know what you think about why things are produced in the first place, because the way I see it right now, the economic structure of society, capitalism, necessitates production for profit. And that's really not a matter of, for the system to stay intact, it's not really a matter of psychological choice. It's a matter of totally contradictory, necessity of capitalism that's contradictory to nature, but it's a necessity of the system, and you have to, in order to compete with another business, you have to make profit. In order to make profit, you've got to exploit nature. You have to accumulate somehow. But if you don't accumulate, you're going to be out of business. And then people that are all in the business are not going to be making any money, so they can't even fulfill their needs anyway. So, it seems to me that the economic system is the reason why these meaningless products like potpourri plug-in air fresheners are produced in the first place, because there's really nothing. The things that are produced now are not really, as you said, for need anymore. When the Industrial Revolution started, it was building up needs and not wants, but now that we all have it, there's still a capital, a drive in the system to create profit, and the only other way you can do it, I guess, is just make people think they need these new things. But that was what your thoughts are on how you can stop. Either short of or all the way up to an action of socialism. You can't really, you can stop the consumption, but you can stop your own consumption in a capitalist society. You can cause your own suffering, because that'll just cause the collapse. Nobody consumes anything. The entire economic structure collapses. So I would just get your thoughts on why you think the production takes place in the first place rather than consumption.
I think you're right because of that system, that capitalist system. I think it's interesting when the USSR fell, everybody in the States was saying, we won, we proved capitalism was right, communism was doomed, it fell. I just feel communism went first. That particular brand of communism. I think in both cases, the human ego keeps on sending it to the full. And we see this now with the collapse of the USSR. What you have is unbridled self-centeredness, which is here in the mafioso, crime, the crazy businesses, scams and things set up. Everybody's out for their own needs, just release that. Here in capitalism, that need, that individual need, and love of money will keep on making a profit. It keeps the whole, it drives the whole thing, keeps it going. I think capitalism is unsustainable, clearly unsustainable in the long term. It's got to end. The question is, how is it? Part of the whole system that I'm fascinated is the charging of interest. I usually don't mention this because most Americans, most people, not just Americans, Europeans, most people in Western culture are not even prepared to question the charging of interest. It's so much part of our life. It's only actually been with us 400 years. Henry VIII bought in. Henry VIII bought in divorce, and he bought in the charging of interest when he broke the Roman Catholic Church. The charging of interest has been banned just about by every single religion in time. It was banned in the Old Testament by Judaism. It's still banned in Islam. Some Islamic countries don't charge interest. It was banned by the Catholic Church up until, well, it still is banned in some modern day religions. It was brought in. The word interest, thanks to the word interest actually came because people say if we lend money, there's a cost involved, the cost of trucking money over or whatever it is. And we must charge for the cost of lending money, even if we don't make a profit. And so the Catholic Church said, okay, you can charge for the cost. And the Latin word for cost is interesse. And that's where the word interest comes, the cost of lending money. Now it's become a profit. And the reason it's banned by all the religions at this time is because it weakens society. Because charging interest is the rich who get richer and the poor get poorer. It's also the idea of you can make something out of nothing. By investing money, you can get a greater return. If you've got money, you can invest it. You don't actually do any useful work. You don't put any useful work in society. Again, most of our corporations are run on people investing their money, not necessarily for fixed 10% interest, but they expect their dividends, or they expect their shares to increase in value. They're looking for that, the same thing. And it actually drives growth. It drives our need to keep on having a growing economy. Because as you know, most of the money in circulation in our society is out on loan. So like 9/10 of the money circulating is out on loan from banks. That money all has interest being paid back to the banks or whoever lends the money. Now in order that the interest to be paid back, money has to keep on being produced in society. There's only two ways you produce money. You either print it or you increase the gross wealth of the country. If you just print money, you get inflation, you get the same amount of money chasing, so you get more money chasing the same amount of goods, which means the money basically becomes less. If you printed 10% more money, but there's only the same amount of wealth in society, the money's devalued 10%. So that's why we have inflation. One of the reasons we have inflation is we're continually trying to keep up with the interest we're paying all the money that's out in circulation. And so, in order to keep that down, we have to have a growing economy. And so we are wedded to this idea of growth. And every economist, politician is saying that we must have a healthy economy. For them, a healthy economy is one that's growing 3%, 4%, 5% a year, whatever. And yet that sort of growth is absolutely, clearly unsustainable. But to question charging interest, but I think it's those very, very fundamental things, the capitalist system, the charging of interest, these things, that have to be questioned and have to go. Eventually, how you undo that is, I don't know.
I mean, if you look at yourself and stop consuming within the system,
if you stop consuming and go within the system, you die.
Right.
But I think what we can each do, and I'm sure most of us try to do, is how do we live we are living in this system, most of us. I mean, you can go out and live on berries in the mountainside, which the winter's pretty heavy. Berries, you're stored berries all winter. We've got to live in this society. How do we live in this society in a way that has minimal ecological impact and a lifestyle that actually is working towards, in one way or another, creating change? Now, we may not have the answers as to how we do that, what's going to happen. I think it's probably going to be thrust upon us, and I think our economic system is so fragile that anything could make it collapse any moment. The Bearings bank collapse was interesting. I think very significant that a bank as prestigious as that should be the first one to be hit by the whole derivatives trade. It's almost I think Shakespeare couldn't have written it better. We're all living this wonderful Shakespearean play the way things come out. But it could have been another bank. It could have been, you could have woken up and not Bavaria's bank, which had gone down to Bank of America. And that might have bigger repercussions. So, we got here arguing very unexpected shit. It's about preparing ourselves for that. How do we live as lightly as possible, live as consciously as possible, and also changing our own attitudes, our own beliefs, freeing ourselves up from this material process.
It's kind of like the system forces you to consume anyways. I mean, the friends at Garment, right, they're mandated to buy computers. They have to buy computers for their own.
It doesn't. I mean, the system requires that we consume a little. It doesn't force us to consume huge amounts. What forces us to consume huge amounts is the fact that we allow ourselves to be persuaded by all the advertising and marketing and social pressure and peer pressure. It's because we go along with the hypnosis rather than standing up for our own truth. So I think each of us, we can cut our consumption considerably just out of our own free choice, but not completely. But if we did that, that's what I'm saying, the best way to stop a company we don't like operating is to vote with our pocketbook and everybody stop buying their products. If everybody stopped buying DuPont's products, colossal as they are, when the CFC issue came up, I bet they'd stop CFC introduction that year. But I mean, we couldn't stop doing that when we our life. Yeah.
I see some other reverberations from this whole, more, and you're measured by what you have. There are so many people who have so little, and yet, watch TV and they're being prices being pushed on them, they can't get them. Look all over the field, they will, not eat, they will do all kinds of things. And I'm saying it's not just a level of we who are here who are able to eat and able to have some other sources of self-worth. It's undermining in the other sphere of life too.
Yeah,
and we all pay the price in terms of people having to go out to steal, take a piece of gold off somebody's neck and kill them for it.
Yeah.
And I see that as coming out of the same hypnotic foolishness.
Yeah.
And more is better, and you're not working if you don't have more, and that's supposed to be happening.
Right.
And even if we individually do, we've got to look at how we think that's a whole lot of other people who aren't here.
And we're now expanding that to the whole world. We've now, go in Brazil and watch American TV programs and or India. Everybody's trying to catch up.
Yeah, farmers.
Yeah. Which is even more impossible.
Consumerism.
Yeah.
I see you approaching the crisis from first point for one thing which says that we are responsible for our own actions. It is in us change it by changing ourselves first. In our ecosystem, they come from within change. The idea of the campus to say that the political system needs change, political system that has bred this whole vicious circle needs to be changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I see truth in both points of view.
Yeah.
I see one truth in that we others need to change the way we apply ourselves. But also the political system that needs to govern this whole thing.
Yeah.
After the grade was this was reading about how the whole capitalism came about, the world system theory, and how it is engulfed us all. What do you think when what's the political aspect? Political aspect of it.
I think many things need to change, and they are all interconnected. I don't think it's a question of this is the answer. If we change the political system, everything will be resolved. We need to change the political system. The whole economic system needs to be changed. We've got social values that need to shift. There's international issues, on North-South issues. There's many things how we care about other people. What I'm saying, I think what I'm saying, trying to say tonight is, and there's an aspect which is not normally focused on, which is the belief systems that are hypnotized into us from birth onwards, they also need attending to, as well as doing what we can to change the political systems, tightening up on environmental controls and corporations. All of that needs to happen. But if we don't also deal with the inner side, the psychological aspect, we're not dealing with the whole system. And if you don't do that, problems are going to re-emerge in other ways. It's, well, I mentioned going along to your doctor. If all the doctor does is give you a pill to take away the pain, you're not cured. Something's going to come back. Either the same problem will come back, or the next day you've got a skin rash, or something else. And what we too easily do in our society is go to the symptoms, rather than dealing with the whole system. So I say yes, we need a major political change, and changes on all different levels, and we need to look at the inner side, the issue of our consciousness, values, belief system, or we're not going to solve the whole problem. All we're doing is patching up one side of it. Yeah.
Do you think if the way things are going, looking at really pessimistic, things will come to a head, and our existence as we know now, will be wiped out? We can actually begin fresh again. Do you give that idea, or do you give that material to human beings to basically do a bit more than it's being done right now?
I've no idea. I think the future is absolutely wide open. I say I don't want to destroy the planet. We may wipe out humanity. We may just wipe out Western civilization. I don't think Western civilization can't last. That's what's clear. It's can we change it from the inside? There'll be less disastrous happening in the peaceful annihilation of Western society. I have great optimism for individuals. I think we all have incredible potential in our own life to actualize that incredible optimism there. I don't know, I have no idea the way things are going to pan out on the national collective humanity level. I do believe in the principle though, that the more we can free ourselves from unnecessary fear, so much of our fear comes from the fact this materialistic consciousness. We can free ourselves from our attachments to things, free ourselves from fear, if we can learn to relate better, communicate better, to be more honest with each other, all of these things. Our own lives are going to be better. The way we live and relate to other people will be better. And we're going to be acting more sanely in our own environment. And that I think is going to help in some way or another, some little way, whatever it is that comes down the line for us. And the more of us who do that, the better our chances of having a smoother transition. That's all I know, in principle. But what that means is that's something we can do now. We can focus on doing that inner work, not first. As you said, first we have to change ourselves, then change the world. I mean, at the same time as we are doing everything we can to shift what is happening in the world, at the same time we need to be looking at the inner dimension to go hand in hand, parallel. Okay, everybody? So it's not a question. We'll come back. Yeah.
How do you get over the problem that people can rationalise their behaviour very well? People who are used to rationalising behaviour, for example, so-called super-green environmentalists can rationalise going off to the supermarket and the Volvo to sit together. I mean, that's like an inherent problem with anything. I mean, people are willing to spend a certain proportion for everything.
Yeah.
And then rationalisation comes in.
Yeah.
I mean, we all do it.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're all masters of it. I mean, it's so easy to do. I mean, you can rationalise anything. Vegetarian fish does not quite admit it.
Right. I need to know. We need protein to make it. I don't know. I think that, again, that's the thing that while we're still comfortable, take the vegetarian one, if the person realises actually they could see that their eating meat wasn't physically good for them, then they might change their saw the sign. I don't think the easy way around that problem, apart from slow process of self-education, and maybe when the shit hits the fan, you'll be forced out of it. When gas starts costing you $10 a gallon, you're not going to be driving a Volvo in the supermarket.
Well, I don't know whether, I think it's something that's more sort of, I don't know whether it's finance or not, but it's something that people can still rationalise. I mean, all the energy thing, I mean, the bit that comes to put up energy and still manage people to manage to rationalise the fact that they have to, they can justify it. They rationalise the fact that they need to use more fuel energy. And it seems to be the last thing that goes, and it seems to be stronger than fiscal sort of
I think we rationalise, I think it comes back to our self-centeredness. We're rationalising because we don't want to give up our own comforts. And it comes back to the same thing all the time. We believe that if I have the right things, or I have driving my Volvo to the supermarket, whatever, it's going to make me feel okay. All the time that belief system is operating, we will rationalise the service of that belief system. I think it's only when the consciousness, when the whole basic paradigm which we live our lives begins to shift, we won't need to have that sort of fix. But at the moment, a lot of that rationalisation is also a lot of denial. You go to other places and there's people aren't even aware of the crisis.
But yeah, rationalisation and rationalising the fact that there's
I call that rationalisation, not rationalisation. As a Russian, but rationalisation. But there is no crisis. Yeah.
I just wanted to make an observation. Somewhat in contrast to what he's saying, I also feel there's a sort of a groundswelling, at least in this country, of groupism, of people actually from all facets of life getting together in small groups, trying to free themselves up.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how it is in the other countries, but definitely it's here. You go and you look in our Sunday paper, and you will see 2 pages. Groups meeting tonight, Sunday.
Yeah.
Trying to come up with these feelings and answers.
Yeah. And I think that's our greatest sign. I hope when I say things are going to get heavy, I'm not saying it's nothing we can do. There is a lot that is happening, and I think the greatest hope for me is seeing the rate of expansion of that. And people are forming groups of all sorts, whether it's environmental groups, self-development groups, whatever. And I think a lot of those are looking at how do we actually shift our values, shift our consciousness, shift our sense of what is important. And that is growing as fast as our technological growth and as fast as all our evolution, that is growing in parallel. And they're all on exponential curves, and that's what's fascinating. All these growths are an exponential curve, the curve gets steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper. And I think it's going to continue. I think we're going to move into a world that's going to be increasingly high-tech, increasingly ecologically disastrous, but with more and more caring, considerate people. People are beginning to wake up and take great responsibility. And that is an unknown situation, unprecedented one. How that's going to pan out, I don't know. I think we're going to be in ultra high-tech, really serious problems with a lot wiser, a lot more caring, we'll say intelligent people. And we've got a bit of solid insanity. So I agree, yes, that is happening. It's happening in parallel.
I find this disturbing.
Yeah.
Because it's not coming from some hierarchy of human beings. It's coming from all levels.
Absolutely. It's a grassroots work. And that really was the point of what I was saying about the Buddha story. Buddha was one person who realized it wasn't working, set off in search of something else. What we have now is, probably, the people of the West, 750 million of us who are beginning to say it's not working. And beginning to look for other ways. We're just beginning.
Gone from a throwaway generation where everything was disposable. And we started taking a look at it. All of a sudden our landfills got filled up. And people had to decide, now what are we going to do? We have nobody wants that landfill in their backyard. So they took a look at that. And yes, there's high-teching it. But we're also seeing Mary and Joe and Sam are willing to rebut it. There's a consciousness that's way down. It's not just, we're not necessarily that throwaway generation anymore. I mean, it's coming out of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's one of the things I think we can really see over the last 20, 25 years, even probably the last 5, 10 years. But
and it's like you said, I don't know what that word you use. I always call it an inverse ratio. I mean, as it's coming back.
it's coming
I remember in the 70s when I was pushing recycling, and I had to fight to get the selectmen in my town to even listen to me. And now it's everywhere.
Now it's politically incorrect not to recycle.
Yes. It's like change.
Yeah.
So when you say that we're going to, I mean, you were painting a sort of disastrous picture there, but I also think that something else is happening. And as much as, what's that name of that prophet who says the end of the world is
Which one is better?
yes, that's the one. I can't say his name. But at the same time, we have this other stuff and nobody's talking about it. But it's here. And it's happening. And as you said, it is our hope. We just don't know what to, it isn't like something to advertise, but it's there. It's a groundswell.
Yes, it's a ground, and it needs to go a lot further. If we recycled absolutely everything, everybody recycled everything, which is probably physically impossible, we'd still be in the same crisis.
Found all these groups, and the people getting together, trying to work out their problems, trying to figure out what went wrong with their own lives, and free themselves so that it isn't this hypnotic tendency toward materialism. You saw it when the people went up to up country, trying to get away from the city, suburbia. There's a natural something inside of us that knows when we're headed in the wrong direction.
And I think the most important thing we can do is to encourage that.
Oh, we just don't know. I don't think we really know until it just happens. It feels good, so you know that it's something like that comfort zone. But it feels good, so you know you're on the right track, so you keep pursuing it.
Yeah, you've got a background in science, physics and psychology, yet you've got a lot of ancient wisdom like Buddhism, Sufism. Is the answer in the past, has it changed?
So is the answer?
In the past wisdom like Buddhism, Sufism, like you seem to have the rational, new, scientific or that orientation together with the old.
I think the answer is, well, the wisdom that is in the Eastern religions or any religion, I think, is a universal wisdom. It's what Aldous Huxley called the perennial philosophy, the philosophy that occurs perennially, year by year, it keeps on coming back. It's that same basic wisdom. But I don't think it's there in religion, curiously enough. For me, there's a big difference between spirituality and religion. I think what happens is that there is that perennial philosophy, and it's about learning how do we love better, how do we become less self-centered, How do we free ourselves from our material attachments? This is the sort of wisdom you find in Buddhism, in Hinduism, in Christianity, in Islam. It's everywhere. It's a universal wisdom. What happens over time is that as that's passed on from one person to another, translated from one language into another, each time something gets lost and gradually it decays. It's what I sometimes jokingly call truth decay. The truth decays over time. And that's what we end up today as various religions, is just different sets of dogmas and doctrines which are just shadows of whatever that basic wisdom is. I think what we're being asked to do today is to rediscover that wisdom, but today, in the 20th century, in 20th century terms, and in the 20th century we are living in a scientific age, and psychology is probably the closest approach to that. And I'm interested in how some of the more leading edge areas of psychology, humanistic psychology, transpersonal psychology, are beginning to explore these issues from a scientific perspective. And I think today we can actually begin to understand what it is those people were talking about 2,000, 3,000 years ago. They were talking about it in their culture. We can understand it today in our culture. It's about rediscovering it. And I think that's what we are doing, what you're talking about, all these groups that are here.
Absolutely.
We are going through this process of, from the grassroots, rediscovering that wisdom. But it doesn't need to be put in religious terms or classically spiritual terms. I think we put in very ordinary, everyday, somewhat psychological terms. But it's about how we think, how we perceive these sorts of things. So I think it's, to answer your question, no, it isn't in the past, it's in the present. But we need to find it now in the present. Any other? Do you want to come back to one more?
I was going to suggest that we could go to the reception, unless there's another series of questions that we want to get into in a public forum. And there's a reception in the faculty dining hall.
Oh, great.
Just through the University Center, you could all go there. People interested, there'll be coffee and just buy food out of there. So
Great.
We follow you. Can we follow you?
Yeah, sure. I can leave some when I can come.
thank you very much, Peter.